Good afternoon, people at NRA 2017, attendees. John Sheehan here with Meridian Weapon Tech. I'm the law enforcement sales director for the company, and we are doing Just the Facts video segments with some movers and shakers in the industry here, and I have the privilege of welcoming Unarmed America Radio, Mark Walters. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, John. Pleasure to see you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it very much.
Happy to have you here. Happy to have you here. So,
NRA 2017.
How's it going for you here?
You know, I just got here a little while ago, a couple hours ago. Been looking forward to getting on the stage with you, and it's exactly what I expected on day one. I think tomorrow's going to be a huge crowd. I've got a bet 80,000 plus. I don't know if I'm going to be right, but in Atlanta, I think I might be right.
That much? Wow.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
So. I think we'll see it.
Yeah, it's been a really busy day. So far this morning, we had a lot of crowds coming in. Now, of course, we've got President Trump is speaking around this time.
Yeah, I think he's speaking right now.
He's probably pulling some people away. I know
he's messing up a lot of traffic.
Why would people want to listen to him speak instead of me and you?
I
have
know.
no idea.
They haven't figured it out yet, my friend.
I guess not. But, you know, hey, the reason why we're here is we're going to talk a lot about what's going on in the world today.
Right.
And in the world today, it's not necessarily the most friendly place for those of us who are legally armed citizens in America.
It's very dangerous.
I know you've got, that's a subject incredibly close to your heart. It's right down to your bone marrow. You believe in that. And let's talk a little bit about that life-changing event that happened to you that really changed the course of your life.
Let me take you back to November of 2002, and you know the story. I've written about it extensively. I've talked about it on the radio for years. I've told the story over and over again. It's hard to believe that it's been 15 years ago already.
Yeah.
You know, I used to say I've been a gun owner since I got out of college as far as defensive use. When I hit some bad areas when I got out of college. You know, right when I was 21 years old, I worked in some areas in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and moved away from home for the first time. And I was in the trucking business. And, you know, most places where freight is picked up is not picked up on that side of the tracks. It's
you
not
actually
picked up
mentioned that in your book.
So I got to see some bad areas, and that's what turned me into carrying a firearm. I said, you know, I got a right to defend myself here, and I'm going to take advantage of that. And years later, as my defensive use increased and I developed a taste for better firearms and more tactics and training, you know, I used to say that a criminal had a 50-50 shot of running into an armed victim if they decided to pick on me on any given day, because I had not yet made that decision to carry my firearm every day of the week. The day before November 2nd, or November 18th, I may not have had my gun. I know the day after I did, and I've carried my firearm with me ever since. And you know, my tagline on the program is never leave your cave. Carry on, carry often, carry absolutely everywhere. Never leave your cave without your club. And I haven't since that day. What happened was, as I was heading to work in the morning, about 6:20 a.m., I still to this day don't know what made me put that Glock 36 on my hip, but I did. And thank God I did. As I was approaching a traffic light, a couple individuals pulled in front of me in what was later I recognized as a Jeep Cherokee. Bailed out of the car, tried to get in the car off the left front bumper, off of my car that was stopped at the traffic light. Couldn't get into the window. One was jumping on the hood. One was pounding on the window, the side window. Woman in the car was hysterical. They turned their attention toward me. I drew my firearm, and without having to fire a shot, stopped that action. Instantly, they retreated back to the vehicle and took off. The whole thing was over in the time it took for a traffic light to change, probably 30 to 45 seconds. But from that day forward, I've never left my house without a firearm ever.
You know, obviously, you not only saved her life, you may have also saved yours, because were they not able to get into her vehicle, obviously they were going to head to you next.
We'll never know. We'll never have the answer to that question. I never did see a weapon. There were two of them, and I wasn't going to wait to find out.
Yeah. So, and, you know, hey, a carjacker, you know, that's one of the lowest forms of life there are, and, you know, you just don't know what's going to happen there. And it's, you know, we talk about the importance of carrying, but what I like to think about along with those lines, and you speak about this a lot in your books too, is the mindset. It's one thing to carry, but it's another thing to develop the proper mindset and to always be in a wary condition. Not paranoid, but just wary and very aware of your surroundings. And I know maybe you want to elaborate on that a little bit.
You know, I picked up a lot from Pincus. You know, Pincus was on the stage too.
Right.
I do a lot of work with Rob, but I'm really into the preparation, avoidance, and awareness. And I take that preparation, avoidance, and awareness a step further. Prepare to avoid by being aware is what I like to say. If you're not aware, if you're not walking around, I don't want to go through the Cooper color codes, but at least be aware of where you are, what's around you. You know, I see my kids with these phones nowadays, and my my heart breaks for people
Oh,
who know nothing more than growing up with these stupid devices, who walk around clueless all day, walking around looking down. It's just they're not paying attention to their surroundings.
Right.
They are setting themselves up to be a victim. And the one thing that people must understand is that evil flat out exists. It exists. If we fail to recognize and accept that there are bad people that do bad things, we risk becoming a victim of that evil. Evil seeks that person out. Evil finds that person. How do you become that person? Maybe it used to be the old days where you were the guy walking around with your camera pointing up at the big buildings.
Right.
You looked like a tourist. You looked like a victim. Today it's these goofy devices. Maybe you're walking around with your head buried. You've got a woman with a purse over, or somebody dripping in jewelry, paying no attention to where they are. Everything's okay. I'm on the right side of the town. I live on the right side of the tracks. I live in a gated community. These things don't happen to me, and you know from your career that they absolutely do happen to you. And that's that awareness of preparation and avoidance. You can't prepare and you can't avoid anything if first you're not aware. And that's just absolutely critical.
No, absolutely it is. You're absolutely right. And situational awareness a lot of times isn't developed until you become a victim. There are people
Sadly,
that just,
that's very true.
They grow up in a surrounding where they just aren't exposed like you were when you entered the trucking industry and realized that you were going to be going into bad areas of towns, and that you had to develop that innate sense of your own well-being to make sure that you're safe. There are people that go through their whole lives and it's just unicorns and rainbows and sunshine, and nothing bad's ever going to happen to them until that event that happens. And you kind of cover that, more than kind of cover that in lessons from Unarmed America.
Right. Yeah.
You know, you talk about, and I'll tell you, there are a few of those stories that literally had my heart racing when I was reading the book. It was incredible. Because you know what's going to happen. When you're in that mindset, you can see it 2 paragraphs ahead before the person actually describes the attack or the robbery or whatever it is, or being shot.
They're compelling, aren't they?
They're very, very compelling stories. And you touched on the Cooper color codes. You know, where it's condition white, you're just completely oblivious. Everyone should be in yellow.
Well, sadly, today we see people, you know, I'm of the firm belief Steve Jobs, when this chapter is written, is going to go down as an evil guy. I don't know how these things are going to be written, but I don't like the phones, the distraction, what they're taking away from us, some of our humanity away from us, but they're taking away from us and they're great devices, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
I use one every day. I've got one sitting right here as far as business is concerned. But what it does to people's ability to be aware of their surroundings when they're out and about, I mean, all you got to do is look at driving statistics and accidents that occur. They're a device. They're a distraction device that can take us away from being aware of our surroundings. I hesitate to think what would have happened if I were working in some of those bad areas back when I was much younger and had access to one of these things and wasn't paying attention. Exactly. You know, I've avoided some situations and walked on the other side of the street because I was paying attention that I'm not sure I would have been able to do it. I had my face buried in one of these stupid phones. So,
you know, the other thing you bring up too in Lessons from Unarmed America, that let's say you are aware, and we have examples of people that are aware and they've got their head on a swivel and they're very conscious of their surroundings, but they don't listen to that little voice in their head. And you had that one saying on one page in there, is the only words on there was, you've got to listen to that little voice inside your head that tells you something isn't right and not wait for the concrete
That's
proof.
your gut instinct. What you're talking about there is trusting your gut instinct. And, you know, I learned both in personal life and particularly in business that your gut instinct is generally right most of the time.
Yes.
How many times have you thought back to yourself and looked, you know, man, I knew that, or I felt that. What you've got to do as part of your training is to understand, visualize the things that can happen to you. Understand, but you can't do any of it. I go right back to evil existing. You cannot visualize bad things happening to you if you first don't understand and appreciate that bad things can happen to you. That's vital. But when you understand that bad things can happen to you and you visualize these things, what can happen to me? We do it when we drive all the time. Sometimes we do it subconsciously. We're so used to doing it, we don't think about it. If I run that stop sign, I could be hurt, or I could kill somebody, or somebody could kill me. Things just become natural to us. That's our gut instinct at work. We've got to become aware of our gut instinct and understand, hey, you know what, that might not be a good business decision. I don't want to hire that person, or I'd like to, but you've got that feeling telling you, I'm not sure I can afford this right now.
In police work, we call that gut instinct, JDLR. Just don't look right.
Just don't look right. You've got to understand how to accept. Really, the key is recognizing it, I think. Would you agree with that?
Yes,
the key is to
absolutely.
recognize that that's, in fact, what you're actually experiencing. Once you understand that that's what you're experiencing, then you can act on that.
Yes.
And you can change your behavior necessarily. I'll give you a true life example. When I talk on the radio, I like to give people examples of real-life things that have happened to me. My wife and I were in New Orleans a number of years ago. Late at night, coming back from one of the restaurants and bars about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. We were in an area that we weren't familiar with in the French Quarter. We needed to get back to our hotel. We finally were finding our way back to the hotel when I saw about 3 or 4 people across the street that didn't look right. At which point I saw them look at us, and I saw a couple hoodies come up over heads as they began to walk across the street. I immediately told my wife, something's wrong here. I want you to get across the street completely. We're not going to cross here. We're going to break the law. We're going to jaywalk. We're going to have to do what we did. Both of us left and cut across the street, catty corner, and got ourselves in front of some other people, at which point I turned the corner and I saw that people behind us were looking at us. We knew that, were we being set up? More than likely we were getting set up to be rolled. I'll never have the answer to that question. The key is that I was aware of it enough to catch it and see it. And I learned some very valuable lessons, and I've learned over the years to trust that gut instinct, and that's what we like to tell people on Armed American Radio, is to remind people every day that, again, that preparation, avoidance, awareness, you've got to be aware before you can do anything else.
And the preparation is also a prelude to your story that you may have to tell law enforcement officials after you may have to act. So you need to tell them, Leo, this is the pretext. This is what happened prior to... You know, I saw the guys with the hoodies across the street. I saw them look at my wife and I saw the hoodies go up. I saw them start moving in our direction. I immediately tried to avoid the situation, but can you imagine, like, if you would have had to act, that
that's the key. You don't want to cross that street and find out after the fact. Imagine if you've got your face buried in a phone and you're not paying attention to anything. You've got to look around you when you're in unfamiliar. It doesn't have to be an unfamiliar environment. You know how many people I've talked to and stories I've written about over the years from people that thought this is not going to happen to me. Let's look at newspaper articles. We see, and there's really no national source of it, unfortunately, but self-defense instances that I write about in the book. You read these in little blurbs in local papers around the country. Self-defense shootings occur here and there. How many times do you see in there, but this is such a nice area?
Yeah.
I never thought this would happen to me. This doesn't happen here. Let me remind you, yes, it does happen here. It happens in your neighborhood. It happens behind the fence. It happens behind the gated community. Cars get broken into, houses get broken into, and people get hurt because evil, in fact, does exist. Understand that as the basis, then you can begin your self-defense awareness and begin to plan a program around that and determine what's best for you. Maybe what gun to carry, maybe even if to carry a gun, maybe to carry something else, whatever it is for you, but you can't even form that basis until you understand bad things can, in fact, happen to you.
Such an important point you just made, and just to elaborate on that, evil knows no socioeconomic bounds. So you could be in a gated community in the nicest neighborhood, but you don't know that Dad 2 doors down is his rubber band's ready to snap.
Right, of
and
course.
He's got all kinds of guns, and he's going to take off and he's going to do a bunch of bad stuff. Maybe he's going to kill the wife and kids, or he's going to take them hostage.
Well,
or
that's
he's going to
never
roam
happened
around the
before,
neighborhood.
has it?
All the time.
You never experienced that in law enforcement, did you?
How about 50 times a year?
Because bad things do happen. And sometimes people do snap. You know, my good friend A.W.R. Hawkins at Breitbart News likes to say, it is impossible for us to detect latent criminal activity. We can never tell when somebody's going to do something. We don't know when someone's going to snap. Are there signs we can look at? There are. But you know what? When I'm walking down the street in New Orleans, I'm not doing a psychoanalysis of everybody on the street corner. I'm looking for what our good friend Peter likes to talk about, baseline behavior. What's out of the ordinary? Is it 75 or 80 degrees out, 90 degrees and humid, and somebody's wearing a hoodie in downtown New Orleans? That's something to pay attention to. Why is somebody hiding their face? What's around their neck? What does it stem from? It goes right back to what we've been talking about, all about being aware. If you're not paying attention to that, you miss that, you can find yourself in deep trouble. And I don't want to have to write your story, quite frankly.
It's not only people, but unattended packages, the Boston Marathon bombing, backpacks, things like that, again, which just gets back down to just situational awareness and realizing that there's evil in the world and that this type of thing can happen. So, with that, just take it past that, what's the greatest threat that we as Americans face today?
Complacency. I think if we look back to what's-his-face, I like to call him what's-his-face. All right, let's go back to the previous administration.
I like
what's
that.
his face and what's her face? What put us there? How did we get to that point in America that we were fighting on our heels for our gun rights as hard as we had to fight for our freedoms and our rights during the previous administration? Complacency and apathy. And, you know, that goes back to the whole criminal thing, too. That can't happen to me. Ask the Brits. I'm getting ready to do a BBC interview today, and I've done a number of BBC interviews. They'll be the first ones to tell you, don't let it happen to you. Stay awake. Pay attention. Stay on your toes.
Sure.
You'll wake up one day, and what happens is incrementalization is a term I made up on Armed American Radio. I like to make up our own words. And the left knows this. The gun grabbers know this. This is a generational fight for them. One step at a time, incrementally, until all of a sudden you wake up, and guess what? Somebody ate the cake in the fridge, and you didn't even know it was gone.
Exactly.
Okay? And that's what's happened. That's what gave us the previous 8 years. We are at an historic time in America right now. We have an opportunity in front of us that we haven't had for many, many, many years to reverse some of those trends,
Sure.
both in the court systems and making people aware. That's why I hope I'm correct when I mention that I hope to see 80,000 plus people here, which would set another record. I hope we don't see a decline in attendance at the NRA convention, because that would indicate to me, and we are seeing somewhat of a Trump effect, let's be honest about it. Is there a slowdown in gun sales? Gun sales are still at record highs.
Yeah.
But there is a slowdown. Are NICS checks slowing down? NICS checks are slowing down, but they're still at record highs.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's consistent. It's just not, we're not seeing the peaks because there's no
Correct.
urgency to go out.
Well,
and
that's
buy
the key.
anything.
You just said it. It's urgency. That urgency, that's what I fear. I think that's what scares me more than anything in America, is that we find ourselves put in a position, and the left and the gun grabbers would love nothing more than, with the help of the media, to make us believe and allow us to get back to that point. So we really have to stay awake now and pay attention. This is the time we should be taking advantage of this historic opportunity and advancing our gun. You know, the NRA, every gun owner should be a member. This is when we should join the Second Amendment Foundation. This is when we should be giving money to advance our cause in the courts, when we've got a friendly attorney general, when we've got Gorsuch on the court, when we're probably going to see a 6-3 flip in the court in the near future. Let's start bringing more cases to the forefront. But that costs money. And it can't, we don't have the money and we don't have the funds. John Lott can't do the research at the CRPC.
Right.
If we don't help fund him because we feel comfortable, oh, we've got somebody in the White House now that's our friend. We've got to dig deep down now and give more than we ever did during what's-his-face's term,
Right.
so that we never find ourselves in that position again. So a loaded question and a talk radio host long-winded answer to get to the end of that, but my gosh, it means put the revenues down, open the wallet. We've got to move this forward. We can't move it forward simply because we got back. Look, every gun owner out there knows it's time to take a break. We all had an opportunity after the election, and I was the first one to say, hey, wow, we did it.
Right.
Take a vacation. It's been a long, hard-fought fight. Vacation's over. It's time to step back up to the plate.
Yeah, there's a tendency to be complacent and just say, okay, our guy got in. Let's just see what he can do. But they need backup.
We can't let that happen.
We can't let that happen.
If we do let that happen, believe me, it can happen. It's happened in America before. This is an opportunity for us to really move forward and advance our agenda to a point that my kids' are safe. Now, certainly a Supreme Court pick in Gorsuch was a huge win and a huge victory for us.
Absolutely.
There's no question about that. But we need another one.
Absolutely.
And another one. And we want to make sure we have another 4 years of Trump. We want to make sure that we don't get complacent to the point where we let our guard down yet one more time.
I agree. I agree. And, you know, I've got a gun rights advocate that's going to be coming on later during the show, and I'll be talking to her about this too. And she regularly debates these anti-gun folks, and has, you know, ready-made answers for them, and she's very eloquent in what she says. But if you were giving advice to people in our video audience and anybody that's walking by, as far as you run into these type of folks who can be very aggressive in pushing their agendas, what would your best counter be to somebody like that?
Well, in a hypothetical, let's take I don't know. Let's throw a question out. What's one? These people they don't think, they feel, they react emotionally. They don't react with a real sense of critical thinking. So it's easy. It's real easy to, if you're smart. Well, the best thing to do is take them to a range if you can.
Sure.
Have you ever met anybody that didn't like to go shooting?
No.
Okay.
No.
I've never had anyone say to me, "God, that sucked. I don't ever want to do that again."
Once they get over the initial fear of being
Right,
scared
right,
of the gun and that it's going to go off, and yeah, they take to it.
Well, ask them questions. Ask them what their fears are, and talk to them rationally about it. And without having a specific question in mind, the best thing to do is just don't run away from them. Don't be afraid of them. Understand where they're coming from first off. Ask them what their fears are. And usually you get those answers from someone who says, "Well, I don't like guns. Guns are bad."
Gotcha.
More guns aren't the answer. So, I asked Colin Goddard this one time. I was on a television show. Colin is a survivor of Virginia Tech shooting. God bless the kid. He had 4 bullets put in him, and he was defenseless. And he had to live through that horror, and he's a good kid, and I felt sorry for him. But I asked him the question, if we could wake up those 32 victims, those colleagues, those friends of yours, and ask them today, telling them this is going to happen to you at 3:02 p.m. today, would you like to have something in your hand, a tool to be able to defend yourself? How many of those people do you think would say no?
0.
The response I got was, guns aren't the answer, Mark. More guns aren't the answer.
That's a non sequitur answer.
It's a non sequitur answer. They're not going, because they can't.
Right.
Because logically they can't answer the question. The fact of the matter is, guns in the hands of good people, as you know from law enforcement, stop bad things from happening. Guns in the hands of good law-abiding people have kept law enforcement alive. We just saw the incredible case down in Lee County, Florida, where we had the concealed carry permit holder save the deputy in the middle of the street down there. That's my home, and that when I see that happening on the streets of where I came from, it really hits home. But provide real answers, not just talking points that they're getting from the news, and actually ask them questions. If you can take somebody to the range that doesn't understand firearms, I guarantee you'll fix them.
Oh, absolutely.
Most of those folks are fixed. They're fixable. Most of them are getting out. Some of them you have to understand you can't. Some of them it's best to walk away. There is no debate. The Second Amendment exists. They just don't like it. And don't get yourself in a fight. Don't lose a family member of it. Don't lose a friend over it. Agree to disagree and move on down the road.
That's absolutely, you bring up a great point there, too. And sometimes the conversion happens after they themselves become victims of a violent crime. We've seen that.
We like to not.
Times.
I know you'll agree with me. We don't want it to progress to that point.
We don't, but unfortunately,
sometimes
it takes something like that for that to happen. But it's also a really good point that if you go into that conversation not wanting it to be an argument, but a conversation, and realizing that you're dealing with somebody that is coming from a position of passion and not reason and intellect and logic, and you realize that, and that the logic and the intellect is on your side, and that they're just very passionate about how they feel, but really don't have an understanding of how the world works, and that there's a lot of evil out there in the world. And
so you just took it right back to what we were talking about before.
Yeah.
And that's a key fact. We can really trace everything back to that. Some people just don't want to believe bad things happen.
Right.
Some people want to go through life, like you said, it's unicorns. I say on the radio all the time, it's unicorns and fairy dust, peppermint smelling fairy dust and unicorn farts. It doesn't work that way in real life. Let's be realistic. Bad people do bad things, and some people smell. It's that simple.
Exactly.
But there are some people who don't want to accept that fact.
No, you're right.
You do people a disservice if you try not to help them, quite frankly. But understand that in many cases you might not be able to help somebody, and it might be in your best interest to just, like I said, it depends. You want to lose a friend, you want to lose a family member. All of us have over the last 8 years. I think we've all had some relationships become stressed over the politics in America today. Most of that is media driven. And most of where these people get these responses, these canned responses to be anti-gun and gun-hating and many other things in their politics, is from the mainstream media that is pushing such a terrible agenda and dividing America, intentionally dividing America. You need look no further than the hostile press that's coming after Donald Trump right now. The guy can't get a break, period. Fortunately, there are clear-thinking individuals who, as I like to say on the air, are capable of getting their head out of their media and living their lives.
Right.
Get your head out of your phone and live in the moment. Understand. You want to know what the weather is? Go look out the window. Don't look at your phone and hit the weather. Go see what's happening out there, is my advice to everybody.
Yeah, no, it's just, it takes me back.
When did that become bad advice? I've always wanted to know.
I don't get that either. You've got people like when I was Las Vegas SWAT, and you roll around, and I got a whole truck full of guns. And people would say, well, you must be a gun nut. Well, I don't own most of these guns. The police department does, A, and B, I don't look at them as, first of all, I'm not a gun nut. These are tools in a toolbox.
Sure.
And I pull the correct tool out of the toolbox to do the job that I need to do. So it's the same thing in my civilian life now that I'm retired is that, well, what am I going to wear today? Well, that will dictate which weapon I'm going to carry for the day.
Sure.
But it's a tool in a toolbox. I don't think of it as, I'm big and bad because I have a gun and I don't feel more empowered or anything. I just feel safer. I feel,
that's a good point.
Tool.
Let me elaborate on that because I put a gun on every morning. And you do wear a different gun and a different holster based on your attire. I'm carrying a Glock and a crossbreed outside the waistband holster right now in a drop slide. I may not do that tomorrow if I'm going to go to an NPE, a non-permissive environment.
Sure.
I'll let the listener decide whatever NPE means to them. Okay.
Right.
Maybe they're going to their mother-in-law's and their mother-in-law doesn't like guns and they want to carry a gun. Maybe they're going to carry a small North American Arms 22 and whatever they decide to carry that day. But your attire with it. Maybe I'm going to my boat. I've got my bathing suit on and a T-shirt. I'm going to carry something in a smart carry, a Glock 43. I'm going to carry in a different holster because of different attire. But the fact of the matter is I'm not leaving my home without my gun. And that doesn't make me a gun nut. And that's a great way to point out to someone, to go back to your other question, how do you respond to people like that? Well, I choose to defend myself and my family.
Yeah.
I have the ability to do that, and I'm able to give the answer that I've had to do that before. Most of these people don't think, as we said before, that something bad can happen, but they go a step further. And what they tend to think is that all guns are bad and that all people that have guns are bad and are criminals waiting to happen, as we were talking about before this segment. There's a politician up in Oklahoma right now who is making waves with what I call boneheaded statements like that. And you read the statement, you think to myself, does she really think that way? Does she really truly believe? And there are people who really truly believe that guns are simply bad and that anybody that has one, you're a criminal. They cannot distinguish between a bad guy who uses a gun and violates every law known to man and a good guy like me who has 21 pistols and 8 AR, those evil black rifles in my safe. They just don't understand that those guns are self-defense tools and fun tools. I use them to plink. I use them to teach my kids with. I use them to shoot with. They're fun tools for me, and they're also self-defense tools. And some people see that gun and see that rifle and think, I'm just simply a criminal waiting to happen. And quite frankly, I don't know that that person is fixable. That's why I said make that determination. Don't lose a friend or family member over it. Agree to disagree if you can.
I think that's really, really good advice. And, again, it's just,
tough,
you said it. It's very tough.
It's
but
tough.
It's here for these people to have the audacity to think that this tool, this implement that I choose to carry to protect myself is going to alter my behavior to be some sort of a criminal hoodlum or someone overtly violent and prone to violence to anyone that might come up to them is insulting.
It is insulting, and it's demeaning, it's insulting, it's degrading. And quite frankly, it's an attack on my civil rights, and it's an attack on my rights as a free American citizen. And I've had many an argument with many people about that. But over the years, I've learned how to kind of tamp that down somewhat. I don't really care. And for example, I told you earlier I'm doing an interview on the BBC later. They want to have somebody on the other side attack me about the things Donald Trump is talking about right now as we sit here today. And I'll be honest with you, I don't really care what the Brits think about my gun rights.
Sure.
I couldn't care less.
And like you said earlier, you found out that most of the Brits are with you on it. They absolutely
it's the elites
support
and the politicians that have a problem with American gun rights. Most British citizens, and who they're going to put on with me, I don't know, but it will be one of those elites. It'll be a media elite or it'll be a politician. It won't be the average Brit who had his guns confiscated.
Right.
Because those people think like you do. They think like I do. They think like everybody here thinks. And they'll be the first people to warn you, don't let it happen to you. They took them from us. Don't let it happen to you. I can't tell you how many emails and letters I get every time I go on the BBC and talk about these things. The average Joe Blow thanks me every day. So thanks for being a rational voice for us. We lost it here. You guys have got to pay attention to it. Hear the same thing from Australians as well.
You're going to hear that, or you're going to get this elite person, and in all likelihood, they've never tasted fear. They've never had a gun put in their face. They've never had someone put a knife to their throat and ask for their purse or their wallet or anything. And that person is not operating from a perspective where they can actually debate you. You have no common frame of reference with somebody like that. They're operating in the stratosphere somewhere where, again, we're at the unicorn and rainbow level and the pixie dust.
Let's go to a guy like Michael Bloomberg.
Yeah.
Okay. He comes up frequently on my radio
A
program.
bazillionaire.
Okay, Michael Bloomberg is worth more money than he can spend in 30 lifetimes if he lives to be 100. He can't spend all of his money. He's pledging tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars to this attack and this fight against our gun rights.
Sure.
In fact, just 2 weeks ago, he gave another $25 million to Everytown for gun safety. Everytown for gun safety. I've been trying to find their safety classes. I can't find their safety classes. They don't teach gun safety. It's code word for, of course, gun control. But the fact is, we've got guys out there who are spending tons of money, tons of money. Imagine the good we could do with that money.
Sure.
You know what I would do with $25 million? Think of what you could do for just people who need it, or just the philanthropy that you could do. And this guy spends it to come after your civil rights. But this is a guy who doesn't want you drinking sodas. This is a guy that thinks you eat too much salt. Yet this is a guy that stands on the podium and introduces the hot dog eating contest, where 40 guys behind him are going to shove 25 or 50 or 60 hot dogs down their throat in a span of 10 minutes.
And then puke in a bucket afterwards.
Exactly. But it's okay with him because it's
Sure.
great for New York and it's publicity for New York. But this is a guy that throws that $25 million and proudly talks about it, because he has to stand on that phone book to get to the microphone. But he stands at that phone book and he talks to you, and he's surrounded by 50 guys with guns. And at what point in time do people look at that and not see the absurdity of that?
The hypocrisy.
The hypocrisy. Man, this guy is surrounded by firearms, and he's telling me I can't have a gun. And then, of course, that leads to the question, why don't you just go away? So they're not. The point being that I'm trying to make is they're not going to go away. It doesn't matter what we do. It doesn't matter what we say. And it doesn't matter, quite frankly, how successful we are. They're going to continue to find another way to attack us and another way to fight us. And like we understand that evil exists, we have to understand that these people are not going to go away either. So if we lose that, goes back to complacency again, and apathy really is the key. Nugent made the comment on my show one time, apathy, that it was apathy that brought us to that point. This apathetic, it's very dangerous. But if we feel that way about them too, we will lose. We can lose. Well, we can lose this battle.
With that guy that we were talking about earlier.
What's his face?
Yeah, what's his face? But, if you're preaching complacency and you're getting buy-in from a significant portion of the nation, that's just trust in me. I'm going to handle it all. You don't need to do that. Let me do that. Let me take over that for you. That's what breeds that.
Right.
And I think we saw where that got us over the last 8 years, and that's why we've had this tremendous flip now. So,
well, media, too, is very dangerous. We've got to keep an eye on the mainstream media.
Yes.
Whenever you see biased reporting, be it locally, be it nationally, you've got to take a stand. Pick the phone up and call your local Fox affiliate if you see a biased report. Or something that the bigotry against your gun rights, because this is your civil rights we're talking about here. Call the reporter, send the reporter an email, write a letter to the editor, and I want to be the first one to tell you the letter doesn't have to be printed to be effective. The editorial board reads everything that comes in, and if you don't like something that they wrote, let them know. Whether they print it or not, they read your response. Take it as a grain of salt. Sometimes take it with a badge of honor that they didn't want to print your response because it might have made them look bad. They pick and choose their fights. My point being, when you see bad press, call them on it. Whether it's local or national, let them know that you're paying attention to them. It really does make a difference.
Well, in an era, too, when the news media has the lowest approval rating and the lowest trust rating of anything that we have as far as of communications in the United States, or they're even lower than politicians, we have the ability to create that change. We really do, through those letters, but also through social media, which is so powerful.
Yep.
So if you don't agree with a reporter, or you don't agree with a story, we can get on social media. We can affect many more people.
You can
than
tweet
just that
reporter
call.
instantly. You can tweet the station instantly. They see it. Whether they respond to it or not really isn't the key. The fact of the matter is that they see it and they know it's out there, so they know whenever they're calling it out BS, you're calling them on their BS, and that's very, very important. It's critical. That's how we keep that information flow going, because believe me, the media is very powerful.
Oh, yes.
And the mainstream press isn't going to go away. They're pushing a political agenda. Can we make some inroads? I don't know. I mean, take a look at what they're doing at Fox right now. We never know how that's going to go either. So
I think that's good. It's a generational thing, and we'll just have to wait. Yeah. The pendulum always ends up swinging the other way eventually, so we're going to have to wait to see if that's going to happen. But, hey, at least through talking about this on stage with you now, you're prepped for your BBC.
I am. That's going to be fun tonight.
You're all squared away now, man. We got you all set.
That is going to be fun. I appreciate it.
We're going to have you here tomorrow, too, so I want to save some topics for tomorrow.
Sure,
but
absolutely.
I really appreciate you coming in today and talking to us.
Anytime. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it very much.
I can't wait to talk to you again tomorrow. I got a whole lot more questions for you then.
No problem. We'll have a blast. Thank you very much for having me.
Take care, Mark, and thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
All right.